So first, if you've got your Chromebook open, you go ahead and close it now. And second, just be aware that moving forward, you should expect to see like rain and potentially cold weather. You should always be prepared to go outside in this class, always. We're not always going to do it, but you should always be prepared. I will try to announce, but I'm not always going to remember, and sometimes it'll be spontaneous. If you're prepared every day, then you don't have to worry about it. So in general, what that means is just things to stay warm and things to stay dry. If you have really nice shoes that you don't want to get dirty, then bring an extra pair of shoes or like bring some boots or something so that you don't, because it's not going to be an acceptable excuse to be like, well, I'm wearing my nice shirt with shoes, so I can't go outside today. So tomorrow we are going outside. It's going to be wet out there, so just be prepared. And hopefully it'll be fun. Like if things are like dangerous, if it's like 38 degrees and there's sleet and ice on the ground, we're not going to do it. So hopefully if you're just prepared for some dampness and you're like wearing shoes that it's okay if they get a little muddy, then it'll just be fun. Going outside is kind of cool. Okay, and then there are a few things that are logistical, and I just want to say we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. I want to race through it for today because it's Monday and I want to do some other stuff. So if you already know what you personally need to do, then you're good. If you looked at your grade today or yesterday evening and you were like, holy crap, what happened? What's going on? Then there are some things that we need to clarify. The in general piece is that some of you still don't seem to be 100% clear on the idea that when you do work by hand, I need a picture of it on Canvas, and then I need your actual work in the bin. It's not enough to do one or the other. I have to have both. So the person who did this assignment, this was in physics, took a picture of it, submitted the picture through Canvas, and then took their paper and put it into this bin. That way, I can see that it's coming in on time on Canvas, and I can actually look at the work and read it on paper. I need both of those things. And I can explain in more detail why that's necessary if you would like to hear it, but let's do it outside of class. My big concern is a bunch of you aren't doing it. And I think some of it is because you are forgetting, which is understandable, but you gotta stop forgetting because you're gonna ultimately get penalized. And then the other piece is that some of you are thinking, I'm not done. And you don't turn things in unless they're done. But in this class, you do. Because in this class, the point of the work that we're doing is to think and learn. It's not to get the work done. We don't need to finish every single task that we start in this class. Sometimes we do. Sometimes finishing something is important. But a lot of times, it's kind of like a soccer practice, where it's like, you go to your soccer practice, and at the end of soccer practice, you've done some stuff, you've worked on some skills, and if there were things on the coach's agenda that you didn't get to, you'll do them later, or maybe you just won't do them at all. It's not checking the work off. It's what's going on in your brain during class, and whether or not you're engaged in learning. If there are things that need to be completed, and you're using your class time, I will let you complete them outside of class, provided that you turn them in on time first. So you turn in what you got, and then we figure out, do you need to finish this or not? Sometimes you won't. You'll turn something in, partially done, you'll get full credit, or you'll get a 7 or an 8 out of 10, the equivalent of a 70 or 80%, you'll be like, I'm good, and then we just move on. Other times you'll turn something in, you get a 3 out of 10, and you'll come to me and you'll say, Greenar, I only got 30% on this assignment, but I was working really hard, and I'll say, finish it outside of class, turn it in, and then you'll do that. So just be aware. And we'll talk more about the details of this, because I think there's, again, some of you are just not quite grasping what needs to happen. The dichotomous key is really important. The dichotomous key needs to be typed and submitted through Canvas. You don't need to turn anything into the bin because it's typed. There's no handwritten work, so I'll be able to read it on Canvas. If you did not complete the dichotomous key but got got most or full points on it, finish it. You don't have to turn it in again, just finish it so that it's done. If you didn't get full credit, but you would like to keep working on it, you should do that, and then you resubmit it, and I'll decide whether you used your class time well enough and turned it in on time enough to get full credit down the road. Here's the important thing. You need to know the scientific names for these plants. You're not probably going to be able to memorize them. You could, all of you could, but most of you are not going to have the time, and we're not going to do it in class, which means you need to have both the common name and the scientific name on your dichotomous key, and a bunch of you didn't have both of those. So make sure you get both of those on there, because we're going to have a quiz on Thursday, right at the start of class. And the quiz is going to consist of actual plant specimens that I'm going to go out and collect Thursday morning, and then they're going to be in not this room, they'll be in a different room, set out, and you'll be walking around, and you'll be needing to identify these plants. Then you'll need to know the common name and the scientific name. If you've done your dichotomous key, it'll be easy, because I'll print your dichotomous key for you. I'll give it to you before the quiz, and you'll have everything you need right there. You'll have the names, and if you see a specimen and you're like, crud, I don't remember what this is, you'll have your dichotomous key to help you identify. So ideally, that will get everybody to at least a 70 or 80% on the quiz. Many of you are going to ace it, which is exactly what I want. Lastly, if you are confused about your grade and you just can't wait until tomorrow to think about it, I've put a bunch of things. These are the things that I'm going to talk about in class tomorrow with everybody, but this is in general what's going on. There's some things that some crossed wires that we need to uncross so that you're doing the stuff that you need to do in order for me to give you the most points possible on the assignments that you're turning in. So if you're like, I just don't understand, I just have to know, look through this list, because the reason that you're not getting full credit is on there somewhere, okay? And then we'll talk about it in class tomorrow. All right, any questions about any of that stuff? That was the relatively quick overview. That's all grade stuff, right? And those of you who are concerned about grades, which I know is most of you, hopefully that is something that you'll be able to kind of internalize. Okay, I'm going to show you some stuff that's actually really cool. You don't need to write anything down. This is just kind of fun, and then I'll tell you what your goal is for the day. And I'm going to go through this quickly because I have to. So just be aware that I'm going to go relatively fast, but it's fun to think about. It's not something that you have to have memorized, but it's cool stuff to think about. So we're going to look at and think about what the Willamette Valley and the Corvallis area looked like prior to large-scale settlement by European Americans in the 1800s. Starting in like 1820 to 1840, like vast numbers of European Americans moved into this area, and it has been transformed since then. But we still know what it used to look like, and it's kind of fun to think about. So this is an aerial photograph of Corvallis. This is from 1936. And so just to orient you, this building right here, that's CHS. That's Corvallis High School, right on the edge of town. This is Highland Drive. Here's the curve. And this right here is Crescent Valley Drive. Raider Way is just right beyond that, and CV is right beyond that, but it hadn't been built back then. If you live in Timber Hill, your house is somewhere in here. If you live on Witham Hill, your house is somewhere over here. And there was only one bridge across the Willamette River, only one bridge across the Marys River. Like, things were really different in 1936. If you had been standing pretty much anywhere in town and looking around, what you would have likely seen was what we call an oak savanna, or open woodlands plant community. This is Bald Hill in the early 1900s. And those of you who are like frequent visitors to Bald Hill will recognize that it doesn't look like this anymore. It's basically covered with trees. It's called Bald Hill because 100 years ago there were hardly any trees on it. the few trees that there were oak trees, mostly growing on the north side of the hill. The south side had nothing. That's why it's called Bald Hill. There weren't any plants growing there. This oak savanna community was super common in the Willamette Valley. We still see places that are reminiscent of it, and there are still actual oak savanna communities that you can find and see. Here's an image. This is this was a picture I took, actually. This was on Bald Hill about 20 years ago. We did some work in a field biology class, and as part of that work, they burned, and we'll talk about that, not right away, but we'll talk about it down the road. They burned to kind of prepare the soil for restoration. Here's another image. This is Finley Wildlife Refuge, if you've ever been there. Again, I took this picture. This is what most of the Willamette Valley looked like 200 years ago. And I want to just show you some aerial photos that just give you an idea of where these oak woodlands, these oak savannas were, and what happened to them. So just again, this is Corvallis. This is not in the 30s. This was in the late 40s. So here's Highland here. There's the curves, and CB is up here now. This is Walnut right here, and it ends. This is Kings Boulevard right here. Kings goes up here, and then it just stopped. There was nothing beyond it yet. Circle Boulevard is now here. So it's just all like farmland and stuff. This is Dixon Creek, and this is Timber Hill. So the areas that I want to look at, there's 3 spots that we'll look at here. One is right here. This is the main part of Timber Hill. If you live in Timber Hill, this is where your house is now. And look at how there's like little patches of trees and not much else. So that's one place to look. The second place to look is right here. And you can see it's this like trapezoidal shape. And there's lots of open, you can see where there's like grass in between the trees. And then the last place to look is right here. And this, you'll see why we're looking there in just a second. And at the time that this picture was taken, that was a cultivated field. Like that's not a natural landscape. This was some farmer like owned that land, all right? So so there's our 1, 2, 3 target spots to focus on. Here's what it looked like in the 1970s. Okay, so this was this picture was taken in 1970. So again, here's Highland Drive. And now things are starting to look a little bit more familiar because there's a bunch of houses over here. Here's Kings Boulevard. Here's Circle right here. And where Winco is, there's nothing. And where Timber Hill is now, there's nothing. But there's a couple things you can see. One is, even in Timber Hill, these plants have started to kind of fill in. Look at the difference between here and here. There's more trees. And then same with this little patch of land. If we look at this little patch of land right here, there's still openings in 1970, but it's more open here than it is here. And then the last place to look is this little section right there. That's this little section right here. Still just a field, right? And now it looks like this, okay? So here's Walnut, here's Bessie Coleman, here's Winco, here's Circle, here's Highland, and here's Timber Hill. So 2 things to think about. Number 1, there's all these houses, right? And that didn't exist 50 years ago. And then the other thing is, look at this section here. It's like full of trees. And back in 1948, it was more open. And then look at this section here. Pretty open, still sort of open. This is what it looks like now. This is that section right here. Not only has this completely filled in with trees, but now this is all covered with trees as well. And then there's this section right here. So this is what it looked like in 1970. This is what it looked like in 1948. And this is what it looked like up until like the summer. This is that section on Walnut where they cut down all the trees. And how many of you noticed that? It's right across from Winco. And here's what's crazy about it, is people are up in arms, like, and you probably haven't noticed this, but like old people on Facebook and Nextdoor are like, oh, they cut down all the trees. 50 years ago, those trees weren't there. So, we think about stuff like this as this, like these have been here forever, right? But they haven't. These trees are relatively young and relatively new. And I'll tell you one other thing real quick. What's up, David?
Why did they cut those trees down?
They're gonna develop the area. They're gonna put houses in. Yeah. And it's the same thing, right? Like, some people are up in arms about that. But here's what's crazy is, look at Corvallis in 1948. This is what it looked like. All this is houses now. This is what it looks like now. Just covered with houses. And people are upset about this. So it's a really interesting thing. It's a perspective thing. Now, I'm not telling you that it's good or bad. I'm not giving you my value judgment. But I think perspective is important. If you live somewhere in here and you're complaining that this got developed, my question to you is, are you willing to restore this? Like, would it be okay with you if we came in and cleared out your house and returned your neighborhood to this condition? Because if not, I'm not sure that you really have like a good argument for being upset about somebody else's house being built here. It's just perspective, right? And I don't like seeing the trees gone either. I liked those trees. I like those little woods, but I'm not sure it means as much as some people think it does. This was not a permanent part of the landscape. 50 years ago, those trees weren't there. They just weren't there. All right, let's see. I'm going to show you a couple other quick things. So one of the things that you should have seen in those pictures is that the forests are growing denser and denser and denser, and they're also changing. Instead of the Oregon white oak that was present when those areas were oak savanna, now it's mostly Douglas fir, and this is what we think about when we think about forest around here. If you go for a walk in the woods, you're mostly walking under Douglas fir trees. And this wasn't that common in the Willamette Valley 200 years ago, and it's very common now. It's the predominant landscape. You know some of the things that grow in Douglas fir forest, because some of them are things that we looked at, like vine maple. There's some other plants that grow in Douglas fir forests. They're not here on Crescent Valley's campus yet, but they probably will be in another 50 years. This is just a picture of what it looks like when these trees get really, really old. They can grow to be thousands of years old. I think the oldest Doug fir that we know of was about 1,500 years old, and it got cut down. All right, so let's look at some other stuff. We're gonna focus on this area right here. So this is a relatively modern picture. This is a few years old, but this is downtown Corvallis right here. Here are the bridges going out of town. This is Reser Stadium. This is Southtown for anybody who lives there. So just to sort of orient ourselves, we're gonna be looking at this area. So we'll zoom in there. That area was characterized by what we would call a prairie community. So this is what happens when you just don't have any trees at all in the Willamette Valley. And we would see our old friend blue ryegrass, which you've all seen, and a bunch of other flowers and grasses. Those prairies are basically gone now. There's a few tiny little remnants scattered throughout the Willamette Valley, but mostly they're gone. This picture looked much better when I first put it in, but apparently it got blown out. This is Jackson Fraser wetland. Most of you have been there. And there's a native species of grass that grows there. And I'll try to replace that picture because it shouldn't look like that. And this is Finley Wildlife Refuge, which is a remnant prairie. It doesn't have a lot of native species growing there anymore, but it's as good of an example as we have of what those native prairies looked like 200 years ago. Alongside those native prairies, we would have seen what we call riparian communities, and CV is built in what was formerly a riparian community. So we see examples of those wetland plants like alder, ash, Pacific dogwood, horsetail, cow parsnip. Recognize all those? That's because CV's campus used to just be a big soggy wetland all year long. And in the winter, there would have been standing water of up to several inches in places. Even in the summer, it would have been a soggy, mucky mess for at least much of the summer until it really got hot and dry toward the end. This is this is real similar to the vegetation along our creek, and that is typical of this riparian wetland community. And in the winter, the Oregon ash trees, when they lose all their leaves, you get this kind of a feel. Things become much more open because the trees lose their leaves. So let's zoom in on our spot. So this is what it looked like in 1936. At that time, there'd been a flood about 50 years prior to that. The Willamette River used to flow like this before it went, kind of did this big S-shaped curve before it went through downtown Corvallis. But there was a big flood, and the Willamette River kind of blew out this way. And so there was a creek, there still is, called Muddy Creek, that flows this way, but you can see evidence that this used to be river bottom. This whole area had been, was basically natural at this time. This would have been a prairie. This would have been this riparian wetland vegetation. So you can see the trees, you can see the prairie, and you can see in the contours of the land that it hadn't been plowed or planted yet. This is what it looked like in the 50s. So you can see this section now has been plowed. This is farm, and this section here has been farmed. And but there's still like big remnants of the riparian wetland vegetation. There's the trees alongside of it, so you can see all of that. And then this is what it looks like now. They've been using it for the past 50 years or so. It's been a quarry. So they're pulling gravel, sand and gravel out. And so all that prairie and farmland is gone. This farmland is gone. The creek is still there. This is that little muddy creek that goes around it. But the quarries have filled in with rainwater. And so there's ponds now where there used to be prairie. And so again, the point here is not any judgment. It's just things change. And so one of the reasons that we're doing the work that we're doing is to kind of track some of those changes on a small scale here on Crescent Valley's campus. All right, so your job over the rest of class is to do one or both of two things. The first is, some of you haven't completed that stick percent cover, and some of you haven't even started it. That's your first priority. I want everybody to work through that assignment. If you weren't here, don't remember, there's videos online, and there I can show you, if you're new, I can show you how to find them, but if you've been in the class, you should know how to go to the modules, click on the videos, go to our playlist and watch them. If you missed some class, or if there's been questions that you had and you haven't been using those videos, then start. You need them. They're there to help you do the things that you need to take care of. And that needs to be turned in picture through Canvas and your paper in the bin. Both of those things have to happen for you to get credit on this. It's not, I changed the due date so that it's due today, which means if you have a 0 now, you can still turn it in and get full credit as long as you get it done today. If you have time, I want you to at least start the Willamette Valley Historical Drawings assignment. And this relates to the presentation that I just showed you, but it also is something we talked about last week. And basically the idea is, I want you to have some visuals. I showed you some just now, but you can find a bunch more online. I want you to know what an oak savanna landscape looks like and what a prairie looks like, so that you have a picture in your mind of what these things would have looked like and felt like. Some of you won't have time for this. If you don't have any time to work on this because you're working on the stick percent cover, then I'll excuse it. But you have to be working all class period. If you're working on the stick percent cover and that's all you get, great. If you finish the stick percent cover, then start the historical drawings. If you don't finish them, that's fine, but you need to at least start them. And then I'll give you time as we get to the end of the class period to take pictures of your work and turn stuff into the bin, but we're also gonna take about 7 minutes to do some cleanup. That anything that we brought in from outside, sticks and plants, including the plants in the bags, I want that stuff all dumped over the bridge in the blackberry bushes. Don't dump it right in the creek, and don't dump it on ground, like bare ground or landscaped areas where we'd be able to see it. If you just dump it in the blackberry bushes by the creek, no one will ever notice it, and that's the right place for it. Don't put paper in there, so if you dump out your plastic bag, take the paper out first, and you can throw that away. Any plastic bags or paper scraps or anything else should get thrown away. And then I think probably the next class will be in charge of doing some brushing and sweeping, because we probably won't have everything cleaned up before then. But let's see, so we are gonna be done at 11:45. So that means we've got like,
10:50.
sorry, 10:50, right. We're gonna be done at 10:50. So that means you have like maybe 10 to 12 minutes to work on either the stick percent cover, the Willamette Valley historical drawings, both, and get that stuff turned in. Then we'll do some cleaning, then we'll hit the road. Let me know if you have any questions.